Welcome, nutritionradio.org listeners. This is Lonnie Lowry, a university nutrition professor of over 20 years and podcast host of long-running shows like Iron Radio. Come on in. Market news from the food world. Hey everybody, question for you today. Are processed foods bad? This is actually something that's more controversial than you might think. There's a huge amount of negative attention in blogs and the media and even healthcare professionals just demonizing processed foods. But what are processed foods, and are there opportunities there to affect the nutrition and the quality of food and that sort of thing? Of course there are. This is a rabbit hole that I have gone down based on a recent article by Nicholas Faraday from the Institute of Food Technologists, IFT.org. Hidden opportunities in the processed foods debate. Now, he starts off by saying that criticism of processed foods is not new, but until recently, the finger pointing was usually placed on ingredients or nutrients, right? Too much sugar in processed foods, too much fat, not enough protein, things of that nature. What has changed is a focus on the manufacturing. So the extent to which the foods get processed, right, with the idea that those impact the quality and the nutrients in the food. All of these different processing steps. And Faraday goes on to say that this isn't just a big food issue. Filtering foods by their degree of processing is actually transcending the way that we normally classify foods. And one of these classification systems is called the NOVA system. It's not an acronym. It's just a system that is agnostic about whether it's an emerging brand or an established brand. Is it supposed to be a better-for-you snack, or is it indulgent? Is it even in the health category, the healthy food category? Any one of these could risk being labeled ultra-processed by this NOVA system. And, of course, that's going to lead to narratives, right, that consumers might think it's bad in some way, it's negative in some way, as opposed to these trends for clean label, right? Fewer nutrients listed, things that you can pronounce, that sort of thing. Now, before you start to form an opinion, or if you already have an opinion, it's interesting that the IFTP says that the term ultra-processed foods has barely registered with the general public, the public at large. So many of the Nutrition Radio listeners might be ahead of the game, but with the general public, they're not really thinking about this term yet. And so the IFT author here is arguing that there's a narrow window of opportunity to sort of shape this narrative, reminding consumers of the stuff that's related to food processing that's really not contentious, right? Improving the food security, taste, safety, reduced food waste, which is a big problem. Yes, convenience and affordability. There's a lot of things that go into the thinking behind food processing, and many of them are good. And again, we need to think about this because I've seen HCPs be criticized in the past, including dietitians, that they have this very negative view of processed foods. And again, when I'm at conferences, I hear different things depending on the society conference that I'm attending. So the Institute of Food Technologists not really looking at processing as so bad. Whereas if it's purely a healthcare-related conference, they might not think quite along the same lines. So in this piece, which is sort of an editorial, Faraday says that simply defending packaged foods is not going to be a winning argument. That's probably true with the general public and healthcare professionals, HCPs. But companies can focus on some of the opportunities that some of these classification systems offer, including NOVA. Even though NOVA is itself controversial, it is often used in published papers as far as defining the processing level of a food. In fact, we can go ahead and look at a different source here about what is NOVA. I think this is worth looking at. According to Open Food Facts, which is sort of a crowdsourced resource for this sort of definition, the NOVA classification assigns a group to food products based on how much processing they've been through. So level 1, unprocessed or minimally processed. Level 2 or group 2, processed culinary ingredients. Group 3, processed foods. And group 4, ultra-processed foods and drink products. Some quick details here. Minimally processed foods are natural foods that have been altered by processes that include simply things like removing the inedible or unwanted parts, some drying, crushing or grinding, some filtering or roasting even, boiling. So there is some cooking involved here. But these are things that are meant to, even freezing, right, refrigeration, things that are meant to preserve the natural food, make it suitable for storage, or make it safe or pleasant to eat. So just some simple details about the Group 1. Group 2 culinary ingredients are just that, right? We're thinking culinary. So oils, butter, sugar, and salt, things that are added to foods that do in fact require certain processes, pressing or grinding, milling and drying, again, with the idea of making the product suitable for use in home and restaurant kitchens to prepare meals. Some examples here, again, from openfoodfacts.org. Stews, soups, broths, salads, breads, preserves, even certain drinks and preserves could be made with these Group 2, right, processed culinary ingredients. Now, Group 3 are more processed, bottled vegetables, canned fish, fruits in syrup, that sort of thing, that are essentially made by adding salt, oil, and sugar or other substances from Group 2. Okay, so we're getting increasingly complex or processed, if you will. Group 3 processed foods have 2 or 3 ingredients. Things that are recognizable or modified versions of the Group 1 foods, for example. And the purpose of processing here is to modify or enhance the sensory qualities. And then Group 4 foods here, according to Open Food Facts, ultra-processed, soft drinks, sweet and savory packaged snacks, reconstituted meat products, or pre-prepared frozen dishes. You're getting the idea here. Things that have little, if any, intact Group 1 foods. These are formulations, if you will. By formulations, I mean they can include some of the ingredients that are in the processed foods, preservatives, antioxidants, stabilizers, but we're also focusing more intently on dyes, other colors, color stabilizers, flavors, flavor enhancers, non-sugar sweeteners, processing aids that can lead to firming or bulking or anti-bulking or defoaming or anti-caking, emulsifiers, humectants. Again, things that sort of point to a created, processed, ultra-processed food. And when you see actual product examples, you get the idea why they get negative attention. Carbonated soft drinks, right? Colas, sweet, salty packaged snacks like Cheetos or different potato chips, candy bars, prepackaged white breads, cookies like Oreos, even, pastries, Pepperidge Farm types of products, margarine and other spreads like Smart Balance. Now think about that. That's sold for healthy reasons, but things like Smart Balance or I can't believe it's not butter, ultra processed according to some of these definitions. Sweetened breakfast cereals like Cocoa Puffs and Lucky Charms. I love Lucky Charms actually from a sensory perspective. Chicken nuggets and fish sticks, right? There's some protein examples. Sausages and hot dogs. So this system, again, it's just looking at how processed something is. My understanding, not being a food technologist myself, is a lot of this started by Brazilian researchers, and it is, in fact, it has been critiqued even by other Brazilian researchers. For example, Petrus and colleagues, Petrus, Brazilian group, the NOVA classification system, a critical perspective in food science. That's the title of the paper. This is in Trends in Food Science and Technology. It was volume 116, 2021 here. But they're sort of pointing out that the NOVA classification system can lead to a negative perception by many consumers because it neglects well-established science concepts from the food science domain. They say it's based on the erroneous assumption that all commercially manufactured foods have low nutritional value, promote weight gain and chronic disease because they contain sugar, salt, and additives. But they say it dismisses the proven benefits of diets chosen with the right mix of foods at all levels of processing. Now, to be honest, my first thought was, this looks a little bit like an apologist perspective for ultra-processed foods. Did these researchers actually work on behalf of someone? Was this funded in some way by the food industry? The disclaimer says no. But their conclusion at the end of that paper was that consumers need to be correctly informed that healthiness has no direct or absolute correlation with the number of ingredients, the intensity, the number of processes, or with the fact that the food was processed in households versus a large industrial plant. So in sum, they say the NOVA system is not an accurate way to define foods. They show some foods that are almost certainly, quote unquote, good for you that could be classified as more processed. So interesting controversy here, but taking it back to the opportunities here in the Faraday paper at the beginning, they are suggesting one of the opportunities is down on the farm, right? You do have large sections of the food industry like the agriculture parts. They're just making these unprocessed foods. They can just have them marketed in different ways. There are ongoing initiatives by food companies to create foods with clean labels, right? Fewer, more pronounceable ingredients, removing the artificial, using food tech solutions, innovations like retaining the fiber in foods rather than trying to fortify them later with other fiber. And there are even opportunities to just revisit and reflect, right, for food companies about what drove the ultra-processed foods in the first place. The push toward lower costs, better margins on the food, more convenience for consumers. Lots of things could be rethunk, and even spurred on by these nutrient profiling systems, these food profiling systems like NOVA. What do you think about this? As someone with a foot in more than one profession, I'm fascinated by this debate. If you feel strongly, you can leave a comment on our YouTube backup. You can search YouTube for Lawnman07 for the Nutrition Radio backup there. And please also subscribe and share and leave a review on iTunes. We are now finally on iTunes in our early seasons. Really appreciate it. It hugely affects it. So thank you so much, and we'll see you later. The NutritionRadio.org podcast is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, check with your physician, nutritionist, or qualified exercise physiologist in order to make the progress that you need.